Let's get started. So, welcome to today's session. In today's session, we want to look at organizational culture. In the last session, remember, we're talking about the organizational structures. So, we're looking at how the organization is designed. So, the different types of the structures that you can have. You can have the entrepreneurial structure where one person is managing the business as a whole. We can also have the functional structure where we are helping each other. There are now different departments that are helping in the management of the business. Okay, so today we want to talk about the organizational structures. We want to talk, sorry, not organizational structures, organizational culture. Today we want to talk about organizational culture. Every organization, they have a certain culture. Every organization, they have a certain culture. Okay, maybe let's start with understanding what is culture. So every organization, they have their culture. What can we say culture is? Culture is a way of behaving and understanding that differentiates one group of people to the other. So if you go to church, there's a way we behave in church. If you come to school, there's a way you behave. If you are at home, there can be another way you behave. So in every place where you are, the way you behave, we can say that is your culture. So culture is the way of behaving that can differentiate. For us to say this is a church, there's a way we behave in that place. For us to say this is a school, there's a way we behave in that place. So culture is what differentiates one group of people to the other. It's a way of behavior that differentiates one group of people to the other. We have this guy called Charles Handy. Charles Handy summarized it and said that culture is the way we do things around here. According to Charles Handy, culture is how you behave around here, how we do things around here. Every organization, they have their way of doing things, which can differentiate them. We can all be schools, but they can be that which differentiates us as schools, the way we do things. So Charles Handy said that the culture can be said to be the way we do things around here. Culture of an organization is how we do things around here. Okay, let's get moving. So if you are to study culture today, if you are to break down culture today, you are likely to get the elements of culture. So which are the elements of culture? Let's have the elements of culture. So if we are to study the culture today, we break down the culture today. What is it that we'll find inside the culture? What is it that makes up culture? So culture is made up of three key elements, according to Edgar Shea. The culture is made up of three key elements. Which are these? In culture, we find artifacts. In culture, we find what we call artifacts. What are these, according to Shea? Artifacts, these are things you see without being told. So it can be easily seen. You don't need to be told how the organization dresses. How do the people in this organization dress? You can see it on your own. What color is the uniform? You can see it on your own. So something that you need, you can see without being told. How they do things, that's culture. That which you can see about the culture without being told, those are artifacts. So artifacts refer to the elements of culture you can see without being told, such as how people dress, how the organization which resources does it have here? What is it that they use here? You can see it without being told. So those are artifacts. Then we have the espoused values. In culture, we also have the espoused values. What are these? The espoused values, these are the beliefs that we have in the culture that determine how we behave. So in every culture, there can be a belief that determines how we behave. What do I mean by this? Let's look at the culture of Christians. How we behave is based on the value that we place on Jesus Christ, the value that we place in the Bible. So behind the behavior, there is a value that we have. Even at organizational level, behind the way we behave, there is a value. So the espoused values, these are values that we have that give reason to behavior. So in every culture, we have values. It can be valuing education that can give reason to how we behave. We can be valuing maybe the customers. That gives rise to how we behave. So the values, they determine behavior. In every culture, there are values, these espoused values that give reason to behavior. Then also in every culture, according to Shane, they are what we call assumptions. What are assumptions in culture? This is the way that someone behaves, not because they have been told to behave in that way, but they simply assume. You are a student here. You are a student here, and we have not given you a list of rules to say this is what we allow, this is what we don't allow. We have never told you, okay, if you're in class, you can't be on WhatsApp. If you're in class, maybe if you come in class, you just sit down, you keep quiet. That is, for those maybe online. Most of you, you just joined the group online and you muted your mic without being told. Why have you behaved in that way? Did we tell you the values? No. Did you see it? Sometimes no. So it's just an assumption. You are behaving in that way because you assumed that this is the way I'm supposed to behave. So behind every behavior, there are also assumptions. There are also assumptions. So behind every behavior, there are also assumptions. So assumptions are said to be the unspoken rules. If you're a manager, it may be easy to manage the artifacts, the dressing. It can be easy to manage the values, but it's difficult to manage the assumptions because people can have different assumptions. People can have different assumptions. So it's very difficult to know which assumptions does each individual have. Manifestations of culture. How does culture manifest? How does it come to light? In an organization, how does culture manifest? If the culture is hidden, how can it manifest? Okay, so manifestations of culture. How can we see the culture? The way we communicate, it can also show the type of culture. So the communication channel, how do we communicate? If the communication channel is one way, it can show that the type of culture, it has a lot of autocratic leadership in it. The subordinates are not given room to contribute. So the communication channel can tell us something about the culture. How do we communicate? How do we share information? So the communication channel can tell us something about the culture. Besides the communication channel, culture can also be seen by the dress code. How we dress can say something about the culture. So if you are to get to a hospital, we can be able to determine that this is a nurse, this is a doctor, by how they have dressed. So you can actually be able to tell, okay, this is what is supposed to be done here because of the dressing. So the culture can be seen by the dress code. It can be seen by how we communicate. It can be seen by the type of people employed. If you get to a place and there are only men that are employed there, it can tell you that the nature of the job is normally, it requires a lot of manual labor. So the type of people employed can tell you about the culture of that environment. We can also have the management style. How we manage can tell us again something about the culture. Do we use autocratic leadership or do we use democracy? So how we manage the subordinates can tell us something about the culture. Now, let's move on. What determines culture? For us to say we have a certain culture. For us to say we have a certain culture, what determines the culture? Determinants of culture. For us to say we have a certain culture, what determines the culture? Determinants of culture. So what determines culture? Culture can be determined by number one, the management style. The way we manage gives rise to the way we do things around here. Let's think of an organization that has just been started. If an organization has been started, if an organization has just been started, and the manager doesn't ask if employees are late, the manager doesn't even ask why they are late, where they were, they just accept it, it's okay. You see that after some time, that becomes the culture. So how the manager, the style that they apply ends up becoming the culture. So what the manager allows to happen over some time, it ends up becoming the culture. So the type of management style the leader is using gives rise to the culture. Besides the management style, culture can also come from the values of the founder. Culture can also be determined by the values of the founder. So the organization, if you're talking about the values of the founder, who started the organization? The culture normally follows the trail of the founder. What is it that the founder wanted? When they started this organization, what is it that they had in mind? We are likely, remember, culture is the way we do things around here. We do things in line with the values of the founder. If you start a church and you believe you shouldn't pay tithe, you see that all those that are following you will not be paying tithe. If you also believe that tithe must be paid, those that are going to follow you will be paid. So what has given rise to the culture is what the founder valued. So the values of the founder can give rise to culture. Culture can also come from the business environment where you are operating. If you decide to start a business in Harare, you might do things different from a business that's in Bulawayo. Why? Because of the difference in business environment. So the business environment, these are the forces that like the political factors, the economical factors, the social factors, these can give rise to culture. And the difference in business environment can give rise to these differences in culture. So it can be the same company in Zimbabwe and in South Africa, but they can have different ways of doing things. Why? Because of the different business environment. If they want to use the same strategies they are using in South Africa, it might not work in Zimbabwe. Why? Because of the different business environment. So the culture can come from the business environment. Then besides the business environment, the culture can also come from how it was formed. When you started this organization, what happened for you to start this organization? Did you start the organization as a charity organization after you felt pity for maybe children that were not going to school? So how was it formed to give rise to how we're going to do things? What gave rise to this organization? That's how it was formed. Let's move on. Types of culture. So culture can take different types or different forms. There are different types of culture. So we have the power culture, we have the raw culture, we have the task culture, we have the person culture. So Charles Henry said that we can classify the cultures. We can put them under 4 categories. We can have a culture that we can say this is a power culture. We can also have a culture that we can say this is a raw culture. We can also have a task culture and a person culture. That's according to Charles Henry. Culture can be classified into these 4 categories. Culture can be placed in any of these 4 categories. Culture can be placed in any of these 4 categories. So, which are the categories? The first one, Charles Henry says that culture can be power culture. And he aligned it to the Greek god Zeus. So he says we have power culture, which he aligned to the Greek god Zeus. So what kind of culture is this? This is a culture where one person has the control. It's suitable for small businesses where one person determines the culture. One person determines how we do things around here. So that's a power culture. It's applicable, yes, in a small business. We can use the power culture, the Zeus. But as the business grows, it can be difficult to apply the Zeus. The power culture is applicable maybe to sole trader businesses with an entrepreneurial structure. As the business grows, we might need a raw culture What is raw culture? A raw culture, this is where culture is decided democratically. We sit down as a team. We decide on how we are going to do things. So we sit down, we lay the rules. It's not one person who is just going to decide, but now we have departments and different levels of hierarchy. Every department can make their own decisions, and they can also receive orders from the senior department. So raw culture, the decision making, it's now decentralized, where it's no longer one person. So think of the functional structure. It's no longer one person doing everything, but they're getting assistance. So it means also it's not one person determining the culture. Then the task culture. The task culture, this is a culture, or the raw culture, the Greek term is Apollo. Then the task culture, that's Athena. For the task culture, there's a culture where, as an organization, we are more goal-oriented. The way we do things is to achieve a certain target. Think of the matrix structure. We are more concerned with getting the task done. Once you get the task done, you can change the way you behave. So if it's a task culture, it's like you who wants to pass. Maybe every day you might read before you sleep, but you do it because you want to pass. Once you have passed, you won't need to do it on a daily basis to say, I have to read before I sleep. You are doing it because you want to achieve a certain task. Your behavior is towards achievement of a certain goal. Once that goal has been achieved, you can change your behavior. Then we have the person culture with the Greek name Dionysus. The person culture with the Greek name Dionysus. The person culture, this culture is based on satisfying the desires of the person who formed the organization. So this is a type of a structure where whatever we do, we want to make the founder happy. Think of Christianity again. We want to make Jesus Christ happy. So even if the person is not there, we want to make sure they're happy. In power culture, if we change the leader, the culture can change. But in person culture, even if the person is not there, we still behave in a way that would make the founder happy. Now, let's move on. Characteristics of these cultures. Let's start with the power culture. Characteristics of these cultures. Characteristics of these cultures. It's the power culture. That is the power culture. There is centralization of power and influence. If it's the power culture, there is centralization of power and influence. So in power culture, one person has the power, one person has the control. So the centralization of power, why it's one person that decides. Then this is suitable for small businesses, entrepreneurial structure, where we have just maybe one person running the business. Because in an organization with a lot of people, you can't have one person deciding on how we do things alone. Because the culture is how we behave. Our behavior can't be controlled with one person. Then the structure easily adapts to the changes in the market. Why? There's a typing error. It easily adapts to the changes in the market. Why? Because we don't need to consult everyone. If you think there is a change that must be made, we can easily implement that change. If it's the power culture, there is no need for consultation. One person is the overall control. Once they think the change is necessary, they can easily implement the change. So it tends to be faster. The power culture requires good relations. That's another point to note. If it's the power culture, it requires good relations. What do we mean by requiring good relations? So for the power culture, for you to be able to use the power culture successfully, you must be in good books with whoever you're working with. Because for you to be able to control two people, you must be at least working together. Because if you're quarreling, you can't manage two people. So for you to be able to manage different people, being the one in control, you must have a bit of charisma in you. They must be wanting to follow you. So it requires that you have good relations for your subordinates to be able to follow you. Then we have the role culture. Let's look at the characteristics of the role culture. The role culture is operated by established rules. So if it is the role culture, how we behave is guided by established rules. So we set rules. Remember, we now have departments. Each department can have its policies, it can have its rules that we are going to follow. So we set rules that we are going to follow in management. And they are different authority levels. So it's not only one level making all the decisions, but they're different authority levels. And it's suitable for large organizations. So as the organization grows, for large organizations, as the organization grows, we can't have one person determining the culture. So as organization grows, we need help. We need others to chip in. Then the role culture becomes necessary. So the role culture works best in a functional structure. Now let's look at the task culture. Task culture. So for task culture, number one is teamwork based. If the culture is a task culture, whatever we do, we have the desire to achieve results. We are not aiming at, it's not about who is the boss. It's about let's get things done. Let's work as a team and get things done. So in a task culture environment, we are all working towards the same thing. Our main goal or our main focus is getting results, is getting things done. So in a task culture, we are working towards getting things done. We are working towards getting things done. That's the task culture. There is teamwork. We work as a team, and we work towards getting the results. And our main focus is results. We don't care who is giving us who is giving us the ideas to get the results. As long as your idea is a good one, we can take it. So emphasis is on experts. We emphasize more on those who are giving us the right ideas, not necessarily who is the boss. So our emphasis is on who is going to help us achieve the target that we want. It's a flexible structure. Why? Because once the target has been achieved, the culture dissolves. So the task culture, we work as a team, we want to get the result. Once the result has been achieved, we dissolve the culture. That's a task culture. Now, the person culture. So remember the person culture. The culture is centered on satisfying the desires of a certain person. The culture is meant to satisfy the desires of a certain person. It is based on the talent of a certain individual. So the individual could be there or they might not be there. So if it's a person culture, it's like where we know, or if we know that our boss used to do it this way, and whenever you use that way, we would win. Even if he's no longer around, we still copy his ways. We still follow his ways. Why? Because we know that was his secret to win. That was the secret to win. Now let's move on. We have Robert Anthony and Charles Henry. Robert Anthony and Charles Henry. So Robert Anthony came up with the different levels of management. He talks of the different levels of management. So we need to align these different levels of management to the types of culture that they use. So at every level of management, there's a type of culture that they adopt. So at strategic level management, they normally adopt the power culture. At strategic level, they normally adopt the power culture. The power culture, this is a culture where, if it is the power culture, this is a culture where they are the ones that make the decisions. Strategic managers, they make long-term decisions. They can make 5-year plans. And as they make the long-term decisions, they don't normally involve everyone. At strategic level, the strategic managers, they normally make the long-term plans without involving everyone. But the tactical managers, these ones, they work on the targets that have been set by the strategic manager. So they work on the tasks that they've received from strategic management. So they use task culture. So the tactical management, the middle management, they work on the tasks from the strategic level. Then you have the operational management. The operational management is concerned with the day-to-day running of the business. So if it's the operational management, it's concerned with the daily activities. So an operational manager works by rules. So they use raw culture. They give their employees rules, procedures, instructions to be followed. So they use raw culture. So normally at strategic level, when we make the long-term decision, we use power culture. Tactical management, task culture. Operational management, which is the day-to-day activity, we use the raw culture. Now let's get moving. We have this guy called Hofstede. He was moving from one country to another. So we have Hofstede. He came up with his theory after moving from one country to the other, studying the differences in culture. So he was moving from one country to another, studying the differences we find in culture. So he studied the differences we find in culture. And in his conclusion, Hofstede said that the following are the differences in culture. So he came up with the following differences in culture. So he was moving from one country to another, studying the differences in culture. In his conclusion, he came up with the following. The first difference he noted in the differences in the cultures, he said that some cultures are highly individualism, and some cultures have high collectivism. Some cultures have a high individualism, some have a high collectivism. If in a culture there is a high degree of individualism, the people that are in that environment, they prefer to work as individuals. They don't love teamwork. So he said in some cultures, we have people that are highly individualistic. These prefer to work alone. They want to be assessed alone. They don't prefer group work. So if we are given a case where they are saying we have people in this country, they love to be assessed as individuals. They don't prefer group work. That is a culture that is individualistic. There is individualism. The opposite of that is collectivism. If it's now collectivism, we are now looking at a culture where people prefer to work as teams. They want to be assessed as groups, not individuals. They want their performance to be assessed as groups. So he was studying the differences in the business environment. He also noted that some cultures have a high uncertainty avoidance, and some have a low uncertainty avoidance. A high uncertainty avoidance means that if it's a high uncertainty avoidance, it means that they are afraid, the employees in that environment, they are afraid of making decisions on their own. Think of a case where waenda kuchipatara wasiwa na doctor kunzi you are a nurse over na doctor sara ukanditasira murwere uyu ukangonzwa aine akuchema kana kuti akurwadziwa tsvaga mushonga wekumupa. You can't, in that case, you can say, no, doctor, garai mandiudza kuti mushonga nomupa upi. You can't say ndiite plan. So in that kind of an environment, employees may prefer to work with established rules. They may prefer to work with established rules. They have a high uncertainty avoidance. But in some industries, there is low uncertainty avoidance. Employees prefer to be given room to make decisions on their own. So they don't want to be pampered with every information. They also want the freedom to make decisions on their own. Then we also have power distance. He said in some cultures, there is a high power distance. In some cultures, there's a low power distance. So the power distance, we are looking at the gap between those making decisions and the subordinates. So if there's a high power distance, we don't include the juniors in decision making. We keep a distance between the juniors and the seniors. We don't want the juniors to be involved in the decision-making process. That's a high power distance. Low power distance is the opposite. If there is low power distance, it means we actually involve the subordinates in the decision-making process. We want to keep a close relationship with our subordinates. The other differences he also noted are as follows. Other differences he also noted as follows. So masculinity versus femininity, long-term versus short-term oriented, indulgent versus restrained cultures. These are some of the differences he noted. So masculine cultures, you are studying the differences in the cultures, and he said some cultures are masculine. The cultures which are regarded as being masculine, these are cultures dominated by men. How do you know that this is a masculine culture? They will tell you that the people in this environment, they are more concerned with status. They are more concerned with power. It's generally the characteristic of men that they want power. Baba Baba, he wants to feel like he's the head of the family. And then, so men are more motivated by status and power. Donald Trump became the president of America, not because he wanted money, but he was already rich, but he wanted that power and control. Yes, sir. So if you're told about this environment where people are more concerned with power and status, that's that's a masculine culture. On the other hand, a feminine culture is dominated by women. Women are more concerned with having gifts at work. They are more concerned about the quality of life. They are more concerned about good working relations at work. So they want someone to talk to, someone to share their problems with. Men can work in an environment with few associates, but for women, they want that environment where they can have friends, where they can have people to associate with. And also women prefer things like gifts. I think they are more particular about gifts and holidays. I think that's why there are quite a lot of events for women. We have Mother's Day, we have Women's Month, we have Valentine's Day. So they are more into those gifts and holidays. So if they tell you about this type of an environment where a manager maybe wants to motivate the employees using the holidays, allowances, creating a good social environment, that is a feminine culture. Then long-term versus short-term oriented cultures. So there are certain cultures where when they make decisions, they look into the future. They are long-term oriented. They consider the impact in the future. So long-term oriented cultures, these ones are making decisions, taking into account what is the effect of the decision in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years. But other cultures, they just make decisions that can benefit them now. And that's it. So if you're making a decision that benefits you now only, you're being short-term oriented. So the cultures, they can either be long-term oriented or short-term oriented. Then some cultures can be indulgent and others can be restrained. So some societies, as you were studying, he noted that some societies are indulgent and others are restrained. Indulgent societies, these are societies which are not guided by strict norms. There are certain environments where They don't have strict rules that you have to follow. They don't have strict norms that you have to follow. Those are indulgent societies. They are not guided by strict norms or strict values. But there are certain environments where they have a lot of beliefs that can affect how you do things. It could be especially an environment that has a lot of religious people. That tends to affect how we do business, because maybe they can say certain days if you are not supposed to work. That type of environment is a restrained society. It's guided by strict cultural or social norms that you're supposed to adhere to. Now let's move to organizational committees. Organizational committees. So the organizational committees. The organizational committees. If we are looking at an organizational committee, a committee is a group of people from the organization that meet to discuss issues pertaining to the organization. They meet to discuss how can we take the organization further. The organizational committees, they meet to discuss issues pertaining to the organization. So the organizational committees, it is a group of people from the organization that meet to discuss issues pertaining to the organization. So we meet and discuss issues pertaining to the organization. So these committees, why do we form them? What are the purposes of having committees? What are the purposes of committees? Next week.
Next ndo kwa mtazo chini. Thank you. Sasa mtashinda.
Andrew is on.
Thank you.
It's fine. Purposes of committees. Why do we have committees? Committees, they help in exchanging ideas. In the presence of committees, we tend to exchange ideas. Committees can help in exchanging ideas. Committees can help in exchanging ideas. Then besides exchanging ideas, because in committees, we're going to be discussing how best can we take the organization forward. So we can exchange ideas that can lead to the betterment of the organization. So committees can lead to exchanging of ideas that can improve the performance of the organization. So besides that, committees encourage representation. In a committee, we are going to have members from different departments. So the presence of committees make these members feel we are also part of the organization. So in a committee, we are going to be having a member from the finance department. We have someone representing the workers we have someone representing the guards. So we have different people, and when a decision is made, all those departments, they feel like someone was there representing us. This decision, it was made, of course, someone was there representing us. So it means they also considered what we want. Committees allow decentralization, because when we have committees, the decisions are not only made at the top, but the juniors are also given room to contribute in the decision-making process. So that is now an element of decentralization. Committees also allow innovation. New ideas are brought because they're not just relying on the seniors. Everyone is given room to contribute. So it can result in more innovation. Then besides that, the types of committees that you can have. So an organization can have different types of committees. We can have the executive committee. We're going to have the standing committee. We can have the ad hoc committee. So there are different types of committees which can exist within the organization setup. So the different types of committees that we can have can be an executive committee, it can be a standing committee, ad hoc committee. So what is the difference? Okay, those copying quickly, copy. Executive committee. So the executive committee, this is a committee that consists of the seniors, like the board of directors. So this type of a committee has power to control. The decisions that they make are binding in the organization. The executive committee is a committee that controls the company. Whatever that they say becomes binding because it has seniors. There is no need for further approval if the executive committee has approved it. So the executive committee has power to control. The executive committee has power to control. Then we have the standing committee. If a committee is regarded as being a standing committee, the standing committee, this is a committee that stays for a long time in an organization. It is sometimes a permanent committee. A standing committee, members who join the organization, they will leave, but the committee will be there. Let's think of the SDC committee, School Development Committee. Members who join and leave the committee, but the committee will remain there. So it's a permanent committee within the school. We can also have the ad hoc committees. The ad hoc committees, these are committees which are formed to achieve a certain purpose. Once the purpose has been achieved, then the committee is dissolved. So the ad hoc committees, these ones are formed to deal with a particular task. Once that task has been dealt with, they are dissolved. They can be called task committees. Ad hoc is temporary. Advantages of these committees. So remember, once a purpose is achieved, it can become an advantage. Once the purpose is achieved, it can become an advantage. Once the purpose has been achieved, it becomes an advantage. Advantages of committees. Committees, they encourage pooling of opinion. Committees encourage pooling of opinion. So pooling of opinion, what does that mean? So for committees, we are able to bring the various ideas in one box. So we are able to bring different opinions to one point. Because if you are doing it alone, you will not be able to hear other people's views. So through the committees, we'll be able to pull the opinions together and discuss every opinion. Then there is sharing of responsibilities. In these committees, we can allocate responsibilities. We have the chair. We can also we have the secretary. We can also come up with different departments that we can assign to conduct certain tasks. So we can share responsibilities and get feedback from them what they've done in their particular department. Then effective decision making. So advantage of having committees, we make better decisions, well-informed decisions because of the different ideas that have been generated. So being a member of the committee, more ideas are brought in, we end up making better decisions. There's also improved cooperation because if I know that the decision that you made, I was also involved or one of our teammates was involved, I would likely support that decision rather than a case where we are forced to buy in the idea that you just formed on your own. So if you included us in the idea, you're likely to cooperate. It also motivates if I contribute something in the meeting and it's implemented and it works. I'll feel like, so I'm actually someone who is capable of coming up with good decisions. I'll be motivated by knowing that my idea has worked. Disadvantages of committees. Disadvantages of committees. Disadvantages of committees. Disadvantages of committees. So what are the challenges or disadvantages of committees? Number one, committees are time consuming. We spend a lot of time in these committees. And sometimes we might actually lose a lot of productive time doing things and we end up not getting even the right solutions that we need. Because in committees, you're likely to end up fighting. Everyone wants their ideas to be heard. So it can be time and cost consuming. Incorrect decisions can be made because we want to engage everyone. Some people might not be having the right skills to make the right decisions. So those that have the skills may be overpowered by those without, and we end up going for the wrong decisions. Weak managers may also hide under committee decisions. When things go wrong, they'll blame the committees. Instead of taking responsibility for their actions, they will say, no, the committee, I had chosen a different path, but they forced me to agree to their decision. And also, frequent visits to these committees may distract performance of the real duties, especially by managers. They might end up losing a lot of productive time attending these committees. Then we have the committee chair and the committee secretary. So the committee chair and the committee secretary. Committee chair and secretary. So committee chair and secretary. Committee chair and secretary. The committee chair, if someone is the chairman of the committee, this one is the one that will be supervising the decision. So they'll be the one that controls the order during the meetings. So they're the ones, again, that oversees the proceedings of the meeting. When people are voting, they don't vote, but in the event that there are ties, they can choose which side they want to support. So the committee chair oversees the committee proceedings. Then the secretary is the one that, before the meeting, the secretary will help with arranging the location, the date, and during the meeting, they are the ones that will be taking the minutes of the meeting. At the end, they can distribute the minutes to those that failed to attend. So that is the committee chair and the committee secretary. Now, let's look at the exam type questions. Okay, let's look at this one. What do you think? So employees in country U tend to prefer working for bureaucratic businesses. They expect there to be a large number of powerful managers who provide guidance on a day-to-day basis. Which of the following traits, as identified by Hofstede, are these displaying? Yes, over to you. What do you say about this one? What do you think? Can we say that's masculine? Can you say it's lower power distance, collectivism, high uncertainty? Take note, they expect there to be a large number of powerful managers who provide guidance. So, which of the following traits, as identified by Hofstede, are these displaying? So, remember we said if they are afraid of making decisions, it means they have a high uncertainty. So this is a high uncertainty avoid. They want guidance. So they prefer an environment with a lot of guidance on day-to-day basis. That one is high uncertainty avoidance. Which of the four cultural types by Handy is associated with the matrix structure? Can I please have the answers? Yes? Is the task, yes. Behavior acceptable in one organization may be inappropriate in another. Is this true or false?